welcome to this June meeting of the Rental Housing Advisory Board for the city of Oshkosh. I call this meeting to, officially call this meeting to order. We do have new members who have been appointed to the board. I don't think they're here yet, but once they come, we will get introductions from them. Until then, move on to item 3 of the agenda, which is...
Could I call the roll?
That is, yes.
Yep.
Item 3 is the roll call.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, sorry.
So yes, do it, please.
Erickson? Here. Ernst?
Here.
Hobbs?
Here.
Hutchinson?
Here.
Eagle? Stribling? Lord?
Here.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I was looking at call to order.
All right, so there are 2 sub-items under the roll call. The first one being board seats.
Yep, and this is in your packet. I think at a couple meetings ago, the board had asked just if they could see, who's on the board. And so this is right off of the city website. So you will see that there have been some changes. There was some vacancies, and then also we had some new people appointed. So the 2 folks appointed, one was going to be coming today, but they're not here yet. So perhaps if they do show up, we can introduce them. But we still do have some vacancies on the board. So if there is any interest, please go to the city website, and there will be a link there, and you can fill out application and everything online.
So there are still vacancies?
Correct.
One or is there an
3.
alternate or?
Or 2, or 1, excuse me, 1 vacancy,
And that is a regular or alternate member?
alternate.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
And that takes care of item 2 under the roll call as well. So yeah, anyone who's watching out there, if you're interested in city politics and the robust world of housing policy in the city of Oshkosh, come on out. Bring us your experiences, your insight, and your research skills.
So, Alec, it says here is expired. So
Yeah,
is he-
he did not renew his membership.
So that one's also gonna be vacant then?
Yeah, and sorry, when I said that, so we actually have 2 vacancies. We have an alternate vacancy and an actual permanent seat vacancy. Because his was just expired the end of May there.
Okay.
Okay. We'll move on then to item 4 of our agenda, citizen statements. Would you like to make a statement on anything? No problem. Item 5, approval of meeting minutes from the April 13th, 2022 meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve before opening the discussion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'm not sure what to say that isn't the second, but it's just like one typo, basically. I just wanted to.
Okay. We'll bring that up in the discussion portion, I think.
So, yeah, I'll second.
Discussion. TJ.
Fair enough. On page 5, like 1, 2, 3 paragraphs down, I guess, where I was speaking, it either is a typo or I said the wrong thing. What I meant was that the work that we're doing with the brochure is important, not the work that I myself am doing. I'm obviously not doing all the work for the brochure by myself. So that I could have just said the wrong thing, but I don't know if we're allowed to change that based on what I meant to say, but I'm quite sure I would have referenced everyone because I know I'm not the only one working on the brochure. But I also didn't see the tapes played back, and I might have made a human error, so.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments or discussion? Suppose we can, excuse me, I suppose we can vote to approve the minutes with that edit.
Erickson?
Aye.
Ernst?
I'll abstain because I wasn't here
Okay.
last time.
Hobbs?
Aye.
Hutchinson?
I guess I wasn't here either, so I should abstain, but I did second the motion, so
Yeah.
I guess
It's okay.
I approve.
Lord?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Minutes are approved. Move on then to item 6 of our agenda, partner organizations update, starting with UW Oshkosh off-campus housing issues and resources.
So I reached out to someone with Oshkosh Student Association. They weren't able to make it today. So I can either keep trying to get somebody here, the contact I have with the Student Association, or if there's other thoughts or ideas on kind of what exactly we want to learn about some off-campus housing, or if other people have connections that we can bring in. So, any thoughts or ideas?
I think it's, a good idea that the student population is informed and informed about, their rights and responsibilities as renters and empowered to communicate with each other in a relatively safe space of the university, right? A space that is not sort of subject to observation from outside forces, I guess. When we've had this discussion in the past, it's been brought up that there's a website that students can look at to evaluate, or I think it's just rent college pads or something like that. And that's been sort of offered by the Student Association as an alternative to some kind of organization, but the website does not satisfy the same things as a real organization. Even though tenants can leave feedback, which includes, things the landlord did wrong, the landlords still have the ability to pay the website for higher rankings on search results and things of that nature. So even if it helps with some of the background research portion of being a renter in Oshkosh, which I think is very important, that website by itself doesn't satisfy any of the rest of it. So I would encourage providing as many resources as possible to the students, particularly regarding their rights and how to organize.
Well, we'll keep it on the agenda for now, and then maybe Lindsay, we can coordinate to try to, get our meeting schedule on their schedule so they can attend.
Yep.
All right,
Okay,
great.
great.
Any other statements on that item? Move on to AdvoCap.
I was gonna say, I know Lou said she was gonna be a little late, so we do have the handout that she did provide with the funding. So if you'd like to wait and see when she shows up, if we'd want to look it over, or if we would, just if you had questions, you could follow up with her too.
All right. Why don't we take a few minutes to look over the data and you can generate any questions you have, and then maybe Lou will stop in while we're thinking of that.
To understand this, I really need to have someone explain this to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure what, you know what ESI stands for?
Energy Services, I think, ESI.
Energy Assistance,
And
ESI. Oh, Energy Assistance, ESI, okay. So these are funds from Energy Assistance and then funds from AdvoCap, February to September.
Are these figures actual figures, or are they multiplied? Some of these seem pretty low, and then there's some that seem pretty high.
I think they go by county. I think if you turn to the back of your document you have on the very back page, that kind of, I think, even
Okay.
behind that, yeah, Tim, I think it kind of sums it up in some ways, you know, how much the folks who they're helping and everything, and how many households, and the amount of financial assistance. I did not put this together, so I don't want to
Yeah.
try to interpret, you know, the data.
I guess we should wait till Lou gets here, huh?
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Should we move on to eviction prevention task force in the meantime?
Yep.
Sure. Lindsay, go ahead, please.
So there's a sheet in your packet right before the map that are some of the graphs that I pulled together. So this is data through May 31st. So again, kind of just looking at the number of evictions that have been filed in the county each year, and so far in 2022. So seeing that we're, almost 6 months in where we're at for the year. The second graph in the middle shows the percentage of eviction filings that actually resulted in a judgment of eviction, both in 2021, that's in blue, and 2022, that's kind of the shaded kind of orange color. So you can see it's kind of gone up and down throughout the year. That data does lag a little bit, so I update that kind of 4 months back since it works through the court system. So you kind of see around 50% of evictions that are filed actually end in an eviction judgment. And then the bottom graphs show the number of evictions that are filed monthly in the county. So you can see kind of throughout the year where we see higher numbers of evictions. Typically that's in the summer months, so we would expect to see that kind of increasing in the next few months.
I'm curious that, Lindsay, I appreciate you putting this together, that in 2022, it looks like the trends of eviction are just the opposite of what they are typically. Usually the evictions are lower in winter and then they go higher in summer. And it looks like this is trending more the opposite. Any
Yeah,
reason for
well,
that?
I don't know. We'll have to see kind of how June, July, and August go.
Yeah,
We don't exactly know kind of the story behind
Yeah.
the data that we're seeing yet, so. Yeah, it's interesting to point that out, though.
thank you.
Was there any, did anything expire in February, eviction moratorium from CDC or something?
No, that had expired last year. Yeah, I can't explain that kind of spike in February of this year. So,
Yeah.
good question. And if people want to see different data or, I'm open to suggestions, so.
So are we pretty much on track to have the same amount of evictions you think we had last year, or it's going to decline a little bit, you think?
I think we're on track for comparing to last year. It seems
Yeah.
like, we're about almost halfway through the year. We're just about half of last year's number, so.
I just find it interesting that they're trending down over summer. We'll have to see what happens.
Yeah,
Well, it's not trending down over summer. We don't know that yet.
Yeah, but you
It's
know what I
not
mean, it
summer
looks
yet.
like May was
Data.
a much, we'll see what happens.
yeah.
Any other questions about this eviction data? All right. Hi. You ready? Not at all.
All right, so you have the latest numbers from WERA. We are seeing a continual steady flow. We did almost $2 million again since the last time we talked. As you know, I do an average of, the state provides me with the average assistance per household across the United States, or excuse me, across Wisconsin. And it dropped by $5, so the average assistance to the household is $3,865 per unduplicated household that we're working with. And when you start looking at what that means for Oshkosh, it means that we're helping approximately 1,250 people Oshkosh. So that's a pretty substantial number. We are now seeing well over 15% of the people that we're serving are now at their 18 months. Meaning they have received full assistance for 18 months, and that is the maximum that this funding is going to allow. We are having a mandatory meeting with the state of Wisconsin at the end of the month, which I think is going to tell us some changes in what do we do for people. With WERA too, as you may remember, they don't necessarily need to point out that the COVID had a big impact on them the same way they did with the WERA 1 money. But we are finding that, and we do have through our programs at AppleCap and through Foreign Services and other suggestions, when we find people are getting to that maximum amount, actually anytime after 9 months, and they haven't been able to find employment or what's going on, we start kind of drilling down into how we can help and what other resources they may be eligible for. Employment still seems to be a problem for some people. Long-term COVID seems to be a problem for some people, that they're not able to go back to the jobs they had and or be able to maintain full-time employment, especially with manufacturing being on their feet and working overtime. So it seems to be a problem for them. Problems we're still seeing is, of course, we want to keep people stabilized. And even with the evictions, everything else, we all know that finding housing is still so incredibly difficult. But we have a number of landlords who are saying they don't want to work with the homeless population. They don't want to work even with refugees. They want to work with WERA because they can get whatever price the rent is. And so that's creating somewhat of a problem. Some of the landlords who did this, I mean, you've heard me talk about this from the very beginning. Some of them who took on people with absolutely no income are now saying, yeah, that didn't work well for us. So they're stopping it too. So it's all good things on this. You know, the intentions were always good to keep people stably housed, to make sure landlords got money, but of course there's always these bumps, unintended consequences that are coming along with this. So we're not sure exactly what their new program may be. Through the city of Oshkosh, we also have additional CDBG-CV dollars. They were called COVID-assisted dollars, that we have money that we are now starting to use to help pay rent and utilities, which was the intent. Back when Darlene was still in that position, she was aware that we got the award and we may not be spending it out because of the WERA money being available, but we're now coming to that point where we're able to help. That's a 6 months assistance, so that will get people up to that 24 months. But we are now, we had been as far as 9 weeks behind on our wait list. We're now at 3 to 4 weeks, so it's getting more manageable, so people are getting their responses quicker. We're still getting a lot of requests for motel vouchers through this because people are unable to find rentals or be accepted into rentals, and so they want that long-term motel stay. We are not moving forward with that. In our agency, we are suggesting that they work with Energy Services Incorporated. Typically, they have had to have that agreement made with the motel, meaning I'm going to stay at the Best Western, this is the rate we're going to give me, and then they would approve or disapprove that with the paperwork appropriate. There's no such thing as a motel voucher to go out and look for a motel based on the fact that some hotels, we found, of course, that we're not allowing people to stay there indefinitely. We know with EAA coming up, Oshkosh is not going to be that place in about 2 months. They're not going to be taking on long-term rental agreements. So some hotels are hesitant to do that. And of course, I think we all realize motels are not a great place for families to stay for a very long period of time. They were never meant to be 30, 60, 90 days of place, you know, to be living. So some of the hotels too are backing out of these agreements. It's an interesting state we're in right now with all of this. But we continue to work with people the best we can and to provide these services. We're finding that there's been a few more people moving, which has created a few more opportunities for people to find apartments, so we're getting kind of back into that natural flow again. And we know that come August, we'll be hit hard again as people are ready to settle down and get back in with their kids back in school, that sort of thing. That's really kind of the rush that we see. So that's what I have. We've been consistent. We changed our process in regards to how we're doing it internally, and we've increased our productivity in our office by about 40% by doing that, assisting 40% more people. So we're getting this down to a science. It took a little bit, but now we'll see what the state's gonna throw us for a curveball to say, this is what we're gonna do different with it. But we're working with it, we're working as hard as we can with it, and I just hired the 14th person to be working on this. So this can take hours for one person to get through the application. The biggest delay for anybody who does service work knows it's getting the paperwork back. So that's what we're doing. Don, you look like you got something.
Yeah, I got a couple. So are the parameters the same? Remember, there was like 4 things you had to do to qualify for this funding. Are those parameters the same?
At this time, none of that has changed.
Okay,
We're just not sure what's the offering going to be. That 80% of county median income is still a pretty decent number. I think it's about 65,000 for a family of 4, right? And so that gives some people some flexibility. Like I said, they don't have to have an COVID impact statement per se. And I say that because we have people who are unable to go back to work because their immune system may be compromised and they shouldn't be exposed to this, to COVID. And so it's not quite as stringent as WERA 1 was, but it's the unintended, again, I use this term a lot, the unintended consequences that landlords have seen the flexibility of this program and have been raising their rents because we can pay it. It was not tied to fair market rent in any way. There's no inspections required like some of our other funding requires. And so we have some that are tapping it pretty hard and sending us a lot of their tenants to us.
so you now have a 3-4 week wait time. Does that mean you have less people applying? Is it started to dwindle down because unemployment is at a record low? And I said,
I would not say that because, again, more than 50% of the people we're working with are what we call repeaters, meaning we've already assisted them with past due rent and paid forward rent, at least up to, up to 4 months. So then if they come back, they can get up to 18 months. We do it in 3-month increments. So we're having a lot of calls. I think we're just got a nicer system in place. We're working with ESI, getting that application for energy assistance done prior to even being put on our wait list. And so that connect time is far more efficient for us. So I think it's just changing our policy has made that. But we're still getting about 300 calls in our office a day asking for assistance.
so when you're paying rent in ahead, how does that work? I thought for the most part we were paying rent that was still owed, not that they're paying it ahead.
If the situation, and if I had, let's just use, I had COVID and I was off of work for 60 days, I was unable to pay my April and May rent, I'm just going back, but I'm part-time, then we would pay April, May, June, July, and August. Get you settled, get you stable, so that by that time, if you're back working full-time, it shouldn't be a hardship on you to pay September. If you're not able to go back full-time, then we will look at September, October, November. Each time recertifying how much income is coming into the household. So it just depends. I mean, we're not just automatically, and that's, I watch some of the Facebook chatter sites just because I want to know what people are saying, and they say, oh, it's just guaranteed for 18 months. It's not guaranteed for 18 months. Landlords tell people, just do it. They're going to give it to you. It's not that simple. There's a process that everyone has to go through. So.
Okay, thank you.
We're happy to help. We now, and you make the point of unemployment being very low. We know that, and I would say we're fortunate, but yet some families were not able to go back to where they were prior to COVID because of some of the issues with families and children and getting COVID and their health concerns. So when people have been affected, we see that they've been affected pretty deeply. Not everybody, childcare is still an issue, transportation is still an issue, all these other reasons people can't go back. If they lost their job in the service industry, they can't just do anything anymore or everything anymore. There's so many things that are tied to this. We're also doing the Wisconsin Homeowners Help, which is for persons who are homeowners who are facing foreclosure. And we're working with a number of families who can no longer afford their mortgage. So when they had their mortgage originally, it was decided that there were 2 people in the household, we're making $120K a year, I can afford this $350,000 house, Now we're not making 140, $130K a year, and now foreclosure is imminent, and we don't know what's gonna happen, but I can't, that's, the housing costs are more than 30%. But if they sell their house, where do they move to? And rent is more than their house payment. So it's just a huge circle and a huge issue we're seeing. So I wish, interested, and that's why I really enjoy being able to be here, because the communication and the need to say what is really going on in the community for the people who are the most vulnerable is big. It really is. The impact is big. So.
This meeting in Madison, what's that going to be about? Do you have any idea?
Well, they're saying there's new regulations on WERA. It's not in Madison, it's just Madison.
Okay.
This, Decker is having the meeting, and it's a mandatory meeting for us later this month. And I think they're looking at this, what do we do about the people who have met their 18 months? Because again, the state of Wisconsin has been anywhere between 6th, 7th, and 8th in the nation in spending these funds. And there's a lot of pride to be taken with that, and of course there's a lot of pressure to keep that moving forward. So I think we're trying to set, nobody saw this coming, right? Nobody saw COVID coming. Nobody saw the long-term effects of COVID coming. Everybody, when they made this, the Treasury decided to send this money out for 18 months, they were like, wow, that's a long time. Everybody will be back to normal. Well, okay, and then we got the variants, and then we got this going on, and then we got prices going up, and I mean, there's just so many things happening, right, at the same time. And so I suspect that the Treasury Department has had to look at this again and say, what are they gonna do different, and how are they gonna change it long-term? The money is out there in 2025. So, I mean, it's time, some people have already hit that. I mean, I personally know people who have gotten COVID 4 times. This is crazy, right? And not got something. My family's been fortunate and not gotten it at all. And I shouldn't say that out loud because I'm just jinxing myself. But, it's really, this whole thing is just crazy how it's affecting families. So, no crystal balls yet, though. I wish they would drop those in the funding somewhere to give us an idea what this is gonna
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. What did you?
There's no crystal balls coming with
Yeah.
the funding.
Yeah.
I wish I had a better idea where this is all going. But I mean, like I said, we've been spending over $300,000, $400,000 every week that we've been putting requests in through the state. So it's still there. It's still a need. Are you hearing something different at the Landlord Association, Don?
Well, I guess I really don't hear many opinions. I just am sometimes I wonder, some of these repeaters, are they taking advantage of the situation where they're getting like 9 months, and I hear when they're getting 9 months back rents and 3 months forward, what percentage of these folks are repeaters versus new applicants?
50%.
50%? But
There's
I
no
hear that.
justification for the continual need for aid as proof of deception. That's not how poverty works.
I'm sorry?
That's not how poverty works.
Okay.
But there is a small percentage.
Sure.
And I will say that, and I say this to my staff who get frustrated by the people who are being imposters and trying to do, not being upfront about some things. You'll do 9 in a row that are great and are appropriate and then you'll get 1 and you'll go home and you'll beat yourself up about the 1. You won't remember the 9 great ones and the reasons that we did it. But I know the government has done similar programs for similar things. 6, 7 years ago, they did a lot of assistance to farmers, gave a lot of money out to farmers because of the prices of milk and different things. Those same groups of people are now being charged with fraud by the Treasury Department because it caught up with them. So if the Treasury Department puts this out, I still have faith that ultimately, if I tell you I'm making nothing and I apply for my earned income credit taxes and I'm showing that I'm making a substantial more, if anybody's going to put those 2 dots together, it's the Treasury Department. And I can't spend my time or my energy worrying about, are you being honest or not?
Yeah.
It's an attestation, they agree to it, unless it's blatantly, obviously, that they're lying about it. We had somebody present as a landlord to get money for a person who already actually paid their real landlord. So that was a clean, saving $18,000 of past due rent. They just came forward and said, clearly fraud. We can catch those, but if you really want to hide it sooner or later, I can't do much more. You sign papers, you attest that this is all true and honest. Treasury Department will sort it out at the end. 18 months is a lot of help, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it's not endless, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
The 6 months that the city is now tacking on to that 18 months, is that the same amount of money and the same terms?
Pretty much, yes. I mean, I think the city requires it to be at 60% instead of 80%, and we are paying whatever the rent is and the utilities. I'm surprised that people are paying utilities more than they are their rent. We're not finding, obviously, the need as much. Water is coming in a little bit heavier now. I'm not sure why. There's fluxes and things that I can't determine why it's different. But yet, you can see a majority of the money is still going for rent and arrearages. Late fees went up higher, and we spend more on late fees than we did on security deposits. Which again is kind of interesting, right? So. Do you find this useful?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, because I can ramble, but.
It's appreciated.
I'll be honest with you, when we looked at these sheets without you being here, it's pretty hard to really get a finger on it,
I
yeah.
guess I'm trying to be I use the same format so you can kind of compare it from 6 weeks ago or whatever the last time we met. Was I here for the last one? Maybe I wasn't. I was on vacation at that time. But you see it's progressively still the same amount, and actually because of our productivity, we're able to assist more people quickly. The numbers are still going out. People are still in need. It's not hard for people to say that COVID has had an impact when we've all been to the gas station, when we've all been to the grocery store, when we've been to these places. People have a need, and we don't know how that's going to get all fixed either. But by the next meeting, I should have some updates, and if it comes out in a simple changes program, I will send it to you sooner than that, so everyone knows what the changes are.
Yes, that was going to be my request, so thanks.
Sure, as soon as I know.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Shear? All right, thank you as always, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, nice to see you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
likewise. All right, that'll bring us to item 7 on the agenda, our updates from our inspection staff, beginning with social media.
Yeah, the last meeting, we talked about our social media page on Facebook, so we just wanted to go over it. There were some questions, about it, so we just wanted to share it with you and see if there was any recommendations you might have. So I'll turn it over to John, just to maybe kind of go over some of the highlights.
So, this is what we came up with, pretty generic, we've got just the city hall thing. What we did agree on was the logo, I think, very early on with this board. So you see that logo there, so we've got that, that's recognizable. And then just like any other Facebook page, we've got your posts and everything else that's down below here. The first one here is showing some of where the letters were sent out recently. We've kind of updated that, what's going to happen, agendas are getting sent out. You see over on the left there with the photos, there's the Rent Smart, that's just other posts that we have put on there. So pretty much that's what it is. We don't really put any day-to-day things on there from our division. It's all just going to be based on stuff from this advisory board.
Yeah, we try to keep the public engaged with meetings, and then also opportunities to serve on the board. And then, as John stated, the rental registry inspection program, we, put a post on there when we send out letters so folks know to expect them. And then if there's ever anything that this group has, we're more than willing to, share it on the Facebook page also. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that?
What percentage of people replied to your letters in the most recent area that was between, how was it,
Yeah.
9th and 11th? and-
Let's,
We've got that
let's,
actually. there.
that's on item 3.
Oh,
so-
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We're almost there.
Okay.
Was there anything else with the Facebook page? Like I said, just please send us information. If we see things, we put it on there, but, we're always willing to share, so.
Is there any, I mean, apart from like, obviously useless stuff, is there anything that you like won't post? I mean, if we find interesting articles or, things like that.
We have to use some discretion
Right.
since it is, through the city. So that would be something we'd probably work, with you on just to make sure. We could always run it by our city attorney or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the one good thing that I can say that we have seen as staff, very little of, when it first started, we were getting a lot of very negative comments, more so about just city government than the actual thing, but we haven't
Sure.
seen any of those for like probably the last year that I know of.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear that you're getting that feedback on this particular page?
Right.
Okay.
So just please send us, information and we'll post it. So thank you, John.
Thank you. Item 7.2, complaint-based rental inspections, 2017 to 2021.
Yeah, this was another item that we talked about at the last meeting, and I think that, the board wanted to see where the minimum housing code violations were. So we have a map here from 2017 to present, and it just it lays out all in red, all of the properties that have had violations. We don't have a mechanism to show if, one property has had multiple violations, but you can kind of get an idea of just, the geographic, area of where all the complaints have come in. John, anything to add on that?
Nope, I've got nothing on that.
Are these both rental and owner occupied?
These would just be rental.
Just rental, okay.
Or it's all housing, there's no, 'cause some of these I thought were gonna be commercial, but this is just.
So there will be some commercial.
There are some commercial in
Yeah,
here,
so
yeah.
there's the apartment complexes there. I mean, just looking right downtown here, you'll see the apartments near the river there. We've got some there. Down over here, this is way on the south end. I think that's probably like Cherry Park or something down there. Way up at the north, up on Jackson, that's going to be, I forget what they call that up there. Soda Creek and things like that up there. Trailer Park is out there on Sunnyview Road. There's some rentals in there. They're not all owner occupied.
I guess I was looking at the one on North Washburn, just north of Witzel. Is that apartment? Oh, maybe that is apartment. That's why I was thinking it was retail as well, but there is an apartment.
Yeah, there's an apartment there.
Yeah, there's an
Mhm.
apartment complex there.
So if there's no other questions on this, if there's any other data in the future that you have questions on, let us know and we'll see. We have quite a bit of information and have different ways that we can produce reports and maps, so just
I
let
guess,
us know.
are there any trends or anything indicated in this data that you feel is important for us to know?
Well, I think what is important is that when these areas were designated by the group, you'll still see that many of the areas in here, that's a good representation of where those areas are that we pick. So I think that's a good idea that we stay focused in those areas.
Does this help kind of inform which areas you're planning to do some outreach to or send out, letters, or is it kind of random?
So it is random. So for right now, we were staying away from the college area this time. We kind of did an early focus on that way early on. We've now focused further to the south, and we'll talk about that next. But we are just trying to go for maybe this area, and then maybe we'll jump to another area to the north, just to get more of a sampling of people to see if there's more response somewhere else.
And these are only complaint-based, not the mandatory?
No, that if there was not the mandatory, the voluntary
Yes.
inspections.
Sorry.
Yeah, so if those were, if those resulted in violations, then those are also appearing on here.
Okay. Questions for staff about this information? I guess things I feel important is like, obviously, the area around campus seems pretty clustered with violations, but that there's no, like, part of the city that's currently free of these issues, right? I mean, obviously, some areas are worse than others, but there's problems, or there's potential for violations, like, throughout the community.
I want to share something that someone, I don't know if you even need a microphone for me. I wanted to share something that someone said when I asked about, what are some ideas and things you want me to talk about at the meeting. An idea was brought up that, similar to restaurants that encounter a health inspector and get shut down, so they're not allowed to serve food to people until they get their restaurant up to code. Any property found in violation should, is an argument could be made that they would not be able to collect rent from tenants until that issue is brought up to code. Fines, or if issued, is another way we could go, is just fines, but those could be used to support low-income housing and affordable housing, including the warming shelter. So, if perhaps, we don't want to go so far as saying no rent able to be collected, however, they might get fined, X dollars a month, and that could be collected into and redistributed to cover folks that are, struggling, just having a hard time, and essentially just making sure that the incentive is there, because I don't think that a fine is a big enough incentive for many of the folks in town who own properties to fix things in a speedy way, at least is kind of what I'm hearing in my circles about folks living in apartments in town.
Yeah, that's something we talk about a lot, kind of the carrot or the stick, and what we have seen is sometimes, the fines, there's ways to, I'll call it, say, ignore them or get out of them, but the city staff, kind of off of the housing study, is looking at different programs where we could incentivize people to make those improvements. So hopefully then it would be, obviously, the value of the property would go up, but obviously the tenant would have a safe, code compliant, living space that they would be in. So we've definitely been talking about kind of switching it, so it's more of an incentive to try to, make those improvements, because we hear that a lot too. It is difficult, with the violations and sometimes to collect those, not even the fines, but just to get the work completed. John, did you have anything, I guess, to add on that?
No, but I think one good thing is that, outside of just a very few, many of the violations noted on these minimum housings are corrected within the time frame allotted. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some where they're going to, have to paint the outside of the house or re-roof the house. They got to wait for a contractor for that. Those are going to take a little bit more. But any of the major life safety issues, I mean, generally those are being taken care of, I think, because perhaps the landlord realizes that we probably could condemn the unit. I mean, obviously, we don't want to do that and put someone out of housing, but at the same time, we want to make sure they're safe in the place they're living in.
Right.
So the violation is usually taken care of and pretty
Yeah.
speedy, okay. Thanks.
That's good. One other thing that was mentioned that I wanted to pass along was kind of along the same idea of, chipping paint, unkept yards, should be issued tickets by the city if they're not already. And that's something that, it sounds like you're probably already doing as you go around. And we say that for, like all these things we've talked about for months, like increasing property values, like just the look of the feel of the downtown and all around town, and just that idea of, if you're going to own property here and have people living in it, just keep it nice. But again, that idea of,
we also, in my notes here, the question of, can the city create temporary housing in like safe but empty buildings? So if folks need to move housing to create, or to like go after those repairs that are needed, like they don't have to be out on the street. Because I know that's a big fear in, with folks I'm talking to about, I don't want to report XYZ because I don't want to lose my housing because I can't find another, there's no empty units, like even though my rental history is good, do we have a safe place that they can live? I get with EAA, the rental, they're like the, what do you call it, the vouchers for hotels and motels, like not necessarily being something that works very well for Oshkosh in particular, because we are like a booming, vacation city for a solid month there, and it's going to be hard to afford to pay that. So maybe something other than motels? I don't know. Like, there's got to be more we can do. But like the temporary housing, I feel like, we're expanding day by day, just not by enough. And, whatever action item we could bring to council would probably be like, we want to build something here and let's sign off on that. Something to that effect, I think would be helpful for everybody. And it can even be something to the tune of, we don't necessarily need or want, how do I say this, like a step up from living out of your vehicle. It doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be somewhere folks would want to stay. I mean, ideally it would be, but it can just be a place where people can exist while they get that work done, and then they can have their unit back, or while they find their next unit. The least we need to do, though, is like, if we don't already have it, open up some parking for people living out of their vehicles in town, because that's happening, and we need to realize that's happening and let that sink in for a minute, but then also, not ticket the people that don't have housing. I think we're doing that now, and like that's the least we can do right now while we kind of scramble to figure out what's next, because things are changing very fast, and I don't expect us to have the answers today. But yeah, that's my 2 cents for now.
Thanks. Any other comments or discussion of the first 2 points under item 7? Item 3 then, rental registry inspection program.
So we actually.
Not mandatory one.
Right. So we do have an update on this finally after about a 2-year hiatus. We did send out notices starting in April. We sent out notices to 81 what we presume were rental properties. That was in the area of Rugby Street down to Michigan, and the other street here is 11th to 9th Ave. So kind of that area in there, if you know where that is, kind of where the Georgia apartments are, that's probably the biggest complex is that I can think of there. That's not all rental either, but that area is where we're talking about there. So 1 person out of 81 responded for their voluntary inspection for April. In May, we sent out 92. 3 people responded to that. That area in May was the north boundary of Michigan Street down to Oregon, and then 12th Ave and 15th Ave.
You sent that out in May,
Correct.
and there were 91?
There was 92 sent out in May and 3 responded for the inspection.
When you say responded, did they actually go through with the inspection when they
They
responded?
called for the inspection, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so obviously, we're not getting, the response back that we would hope. It takes a lot of staff time to generate the letters. First, we have to figure out, which properties are actually rental, so that's another process to identify those. And then just kind of going through that process to get the addresses and get everything sent out. So it's something that we'll continue to do, but right now, we're not, receiving a lot of, positive feedback, not feedback, but a response that folks, want us to do the inspections on a voluntary basis.
It's just kind of minutia, but, a place like Georgia Gardens, which was condoized, and then a lot of people couldn't sell their condos, then they turned them into rentals. And there's a real problem when you have one building that used to be a rental and had one landlord, now you can have a whole bunch of landlords in one building because they didn't sell their condo or whatever. How did you Did you just send the letters out to everybody in the Georgia Gardens?
Yeah.
So how we basically look at this is if the address, the mailing address is not that parcel address,
Okay.
it gets a notice.
Okay,
And some of those obviously will get back returned, you know, this is our summer home or whatever the situation, it's vacant, you know, my mother-in-law used to live there or whatever, and she passed away, whatever the story might be.
Yeah.
But generally, that's kind of what we're thinking, if the mailing address doesn't match the parcel address, probably a rental.
yeah. But you understand what I'm saying, some of those, that building is a real, you could have, I don't know how many landlords in that complex.
And we would do that for that, we would pick that out. You know,
Yeah.
we would pick that out because each one's gonna have a mailing address.
Okay. I just wondered how you handled it.
And like you said, those were condo-wise, so they all have separate addresses.
Were the number of violations found in those units roughly consistent with the,
Yeah, yeah.
so like
Yep.
5?
This is a little off the tangent, but it's the rental registry. You know, we had a little discussion last time, you know, and a lot of people that get these 5 days, and I tell them, I know you got it on the third day and you don't have enough time, and people call and say, call them, they'll give you an extension. How many people do you have email addresses for that you can email, you know, when you have something like a mattress on the porch or something like that?
If they are registered for us, we should have their email address.
Okay.
And
And what percentage do you think do you have a really good handle on that?
no,
No, okay.
We send it out, but it's still voluntary.
Why is it voluntary? Like, is that in the interest of the people that live in the city of Oshkosh for it to be voluntary?
I think you'd need a voluntary email address or?
Well,
I mean, like, the whole
They mean
inspection program.
well, I'll speak to that. So the inspection program has to be voluntary because the landlords got state law changed to prevent the city, specifically Oshkosh, from enacting a mandatory ordinance. That was outlawed in the omnibus landlord tenant bill that Mr. Lord spoke on behalf of to the state legislature that allowed for that, as well as things like you know, the late fees problem that Lou mentioned, I think is a direct result of that legislation, which provides the opportunity for landlords to charge like unlimited fines and fees. Basically, the bill neutered the city's ability to meaningfully implement the inspection program. And that plus the like campaign of misinformation which ran in the city around the time that the ordinance was proposed, and as was mentioned, general just sort of like mistrust of government and city programs have brought the program to where it is today.
so right now it is voluntary, but, you know, we have talked about, is there an easier way to try to reach out, you know, to the folks, you know, instead of mailing the letters, maybe email, we get a better response, so we're
Is there a
continuing.
way we could pick that up? You know, I know you send out these mailers to, you know, for the inspection program. Is there a better way for we could get people to get a good email list? Because a good email list would mean a lot, not just for when there's, you know,
Yeah, it is.
I'm on that list and I was really appreciative. They said, hey, the hose is off my sump pump at a property. And I
Yeah.
could fix it that afternoon.
Right.
And rather than, you know, still got it for a few days later. But to have a really good email list of all your housing providers is pretty crucial, you know, for communication. And we don't have good communication.
Do you encourage apartment association members to register?
Be honest with you, I don't talk, it's not something we bring up very often, but I would urge
So
them
no.
to, if they talk to me about it, I would urge them to put their email address in.
Right, so yeah, we kind of have a two-step, you know, we have the registry program where they register it as a rental. And we have a few data, you know, sources or areas that we look, you know, if, like John said, if the owner and then the mailing address are different, and sometimes assessors has that information, but it's not a perfect list. We don't have every single rental identified in the city. So then we get their information, and we do have quite a few emails, not for everybody, of course, but usually we do collect that with permits. So if somebody comes in for a building permit, we do have that information that we could utilize for email as perhaps another way to communicate. But as far as if there's houses in here that we're sending it to, and they recently haven't gotten permits, it's going to the owner, because John, correct me if I'm wrong, we have to send the letter to the owner and to the tenant.
on the correction notice is what we always do.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And just for the rental, the voluntary inspection program?
That is just getting sent to the property address.
The property address? Okay, so,
It's sent out, it says tenants, and then the address.
yeah. So, it, you know, like Chair Ernst said, there are some limitations that we have, you know, with implementing the program, just with state statute,
I
that we
just
have
think
to
there'd
be
be a really,
mindful of.
that'd be something I'd really be interested in working on, is trying to get a really good email list of housing providers, because it would be
Yeah.
so much.
What would be
you could
nice
send
is-
out mass emails for when there's.
If we could
an
make it
issue.
mandatory, you know,
What's that?
and this, if state would issue a law that says, if you are a landlord and you have a city that has a rental program or rental registration program, it's mandatory that you provide them with an email contact.
Yeah.
And make that list mandatory, but unfortunately, we can't make that mandatory.
So you end up sending out a paper.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the best we can, the best information we have is what our, you know, city assessors has. So that's unfortunately the situation that we're in. You know, we want to ensure that, you know, the properties are safe and, you know, people are in units, you know, that meet code. But typically, it's just more based on complaints. It's not the proactive program that we were hoping to do. So we'll obviously continue to do complaints, but it's something that staff continuously looks at this program because it takes a lot of staff time. We're having, you know, one person to call back. That's a lot. So we might look at different ways of, you know, changing the program a bit so it doesn't take as much staff time, but we still can get the word out to try to encourage people to, you know, participate in the program, to allow us to do an inspection to ensure that their property or their unit is safe.
That's kind of terrifying, though, because if it's not safe, they have nowhere to stay.
I'm sorry.
And then that's just, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that compounds the problem, just
Yeah.
with the lack of available units in the community, affordable units.
Just units, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there any reason why you can't just, rather than, I don't know how much of, what takes the most time, but when you were talking about determining what units are rental versus owner occupied, did you just blanket that neighborhood? I mean, just every address, current occupant, if you have an issue, whether you're a owner or tenant?
I mean, we certainly could.
I don't
You
know
know,
if that
we
would
try
save
not to
time
be
or not.
too invasive where we're sending everybody. And, you know, I think between the kind of the data sources, you know, we do look at, we have a pretty good idea of which ones are rentals. It's not perfect, but we're hitting the majority of them, I would say. Would you say that, John?
Yeah, I would say that.
Okay.
And I
But
think
yeah,
we've
no, I
got
get
that
what you're
part.
saying, just
Like
cover
that-
everybody.
Right, that major part of figuring out what was rentals, I think we've got a pretty good handle on that. But when we look at, I forget the number now of rental registrations that aren't in, and I think it was at least 30% of what we think are rental properties, we didn't get back.
They
any
chose not
registrations
to
for.
send, you know, the registration back.
So how do you get a more positive relationship going that you can, right now, we can't even communicate with those folks. How would you go about doing that? How do you think that'd be a better way to do it?
Well, I think this group, you know, could be a voice with partnering with different organizations such as the Apartment
We're
Association.
a real small organization, you know, so,
Okay.
but, you know, would help.
I think it would help. Kind of begs the question why it hasn't happened already, if you think the email list is important.
Well, maybe that's something I talked about and get something we can post on social media and stuff and see if we can help that.
That'd be appreciated.
The other thing is, most landlords only own 2 properties. They own a store with a couple properties, and they're pretty much loose cannons. So they're not really tied into a lot of things, you know, so.
So that, I think, creates all the more justification for you as president of the apartment association to provide that insight for them.
You do the best you can, but you can't get people to
You've said you
participate in what we do any more than you can, you know, so.
Sure, but you've also said you haven't tried, so, like, even if the city is being ineffective, like, that's not an argument for for the
Yeah, to
board.
be honest with you, I'm kind of brainstorming right now more than anything else to see if there's a better way to get better communications and a better email list. I didn't know, this is the first time you've even asked the question of what percentage you have the email list. I know that you didn't have a lot of them, but I was asking that to try to rectify that problem, so.
Okay.
Any other comments on the inspection program? I'm all in favor of figuring out ways to give it a bit more teeth, given the severe limitations put on by state law.
And that's where we were kind of talking about earlier, you know, maybe not so much the stick, but the carrot. You
Yep.
know, can we try to, and is there an incentive to try to get these units up to code? And it's, we're looking at what we can do, what resources we could use to try that approach.
Have more carrot than stick,
Correct.
yeah.
Is there, I know like in the city, I feel like I'm always saying in the city of Milwaukee, but that's where I own a lot of property and they actually, you can sign up with the e-notify, and I know there's an e-notify system here, right? Where you can sign up for your property. You say, this is my property, and send out anytime there's a violation or any sort of notice, you'll get an email notification that just occurred on your property. And you can do it not only for your property, but anybody's property. Like you can say within a 1-block radius of the property that I own, so you can find out even if there's car thefts in that area or, you know, all sorts. You can check off what you want and you can get inundated on the information that you get back. Is that something that Oshkosh has the capability?
Yeah, we don't have a system as sophisticated as that, but we do have ways with sending violation notices via email or a letter, and John and his group do that. Typically, we do send something hard copy just so we have, you know, copy of that, but we do have the capability to send something out via email.
But this is like this is automated. It's not like somebody, you know.
Yeah, we have, it is automated if we have the contact information for the parcel. Anything to add?
Yeah, but nothing, I think.
Nothing like,
with,
yeah, not as.
Yeah, nothing that's sophisticated,
Yeah.
and I don't know what program even regulates that, if it's neighborhood services or whoever it is in Milwaukee that does that, but you know, I can imagine that'd be a pretty hefty bill to try to get some software. to use.
Yeah, I don't know what it would cost, but I think Oshkosh has something similar, right, where you report potholes or things like that, correct?
Oh, see-click fix.
Yeah,
Is what you're
see-click
talking
fix,
about,
yeah.
sure.
And so it's something similar to that, where if there's a problem, and if you want to know about it in your neighborhood, whether it's theft or whatever, you can check. You want to know about code violations, do you want to know about theft, you want to know, you know, whatever. You can get automatic notifications out of that e-click system when you sign up for it.
Okay.
Maybe that's something we could look into with the C-click fix. Not all, or hardly any of the housing complaints go through the C-click fix, but any of the junk and debris or long grass or cars parked in the yard, that all does, and maybe there is some automated end to that.
And that, like, they do, what is that, cross-connection inspections in Milwaukee, and so that'll be something that I will get a notification on it before I ever get, you know, it'll be days or sometimes longer before I get anything in the mail. So that's the Don's point, is that as soon as it goes in there to be mailed out, you get a notification through your email system, so it's
Sure.
quicker. But I don't know what the cost of doing that is.
That's something we can look at Milwaukee's and see what they have. Thank you.
You know, is there any way we could coordinate that? You know, the Oshkosh Police has a program too, where you give them their email address, and there's something happens to your property, there's a police call, you can get an email. I don't know how well that's received either, but I don't know if that program is really on most people's radar screen either.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know it's geared more towards police, but it's something we could certainly look at.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other discussion there on these items? All right, well, if you get any ideas in the meantime, we can bring them up in item 10, other business. But for now, we'll move on to item VIII, which is approve the public information campaign. So I know this was on the agenda for the canceled meeting from last month. The attached version of the brochure is the most current version. I tried to address all of the issues that were brought up in the minutes from the April meeting. I know there was some questions about using the term thrive, and that really just came out of discussions we had during the brainstorming step of this, of wanting something like catchy or memorable, something easy to remember that would help the campaign stick out. So that's where it stands now. I think the goal today would be to either say yes or no. If yes, we can start talking about where we want to drop them off and stuff like that. If no, then it's, I guess, back to the drawing board. And again, I did my best with my limited graphic design and word processing skills, so. Hopefully by now, all the grammatical problems have been ironed out.
What are you asking? What are we?
You're looking for a motion to approve the,
Well, is there any discussion before we? Yeah, I would, and so with that in mind, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I would make a motion to approve the brochure as provided. And I think you also did a poster, right?
The poster would just basically be a enhanced version of the logo, but for the sake of efficiency, I think we just decided to focus on the brochure for now.
I'll second.
All right. Take a roll call vote then.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ernst,
Aye.
Hobbs,
Aye.
Hutchinson,
Aye.
Lord.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, fantastic. What I would like to do then for our next meeting is generate a list of locations to drop the information off. Feel free to email those to staff as you generate them, and then we will come up with a plan for distribution. Unless there's major changes in the law in the short term, which I don't think there will be really, the information in the brochure is pretty stable in that regard, so. All right, sweet. Move on to item 9 then, housing study recommendations, focusing, I guess, on 2 specific programs, rent to own, and then a rent a room program.
Yeah, these were 2 items, 2 ideas that the board had talked about at a few of the workshops. The rent to own is included in our housing study, so that is something that we will definitely be looking at. And then the rent a room was an idea that a former board member had come up with, so it's something that, I would like to pass, your recommendations or, what ideas you guys, would like to see, implemented or considered at least to council. So we did have a workshop a couple weeks ago, so unfortunately, because we had to cancel that meeting, I wasn't able to talk about these items, but we probably most likely will have some upcoming workshops with council again, so I'll certainly bring it up. But just wanted to get thoughts if everybody was on board for the Rental Housing Advisory Board to support the rent-to-own program, and then what, with rent-a-room, if that's something you'd want staff to maybe look more into to see what type of that program, what that could look like.
Sure. Let's start with rent to own.
So is this rent to own, is this just, we're just looking at that right now? It's not like something that's formulated?
No, it's just, we're just looking at it. It was just an idea, recommendation in our housing study. You had mentioned quite a few landlords have 1, 2 properties, maybe they're older. Could a tenant go in there and, have some agreement to say, okay, in X amount of years, I will purchase this property from you? So
Yeah,
something
I
like
think
that.
that's a very valid thing because we've seen the percentage of rentals increase in Oshkosh, I don't know, it's 45% now.
Roughly.
You could, still keep your rental stock as a duplex, but I don't know what the average age of a landlord is in Oshkosh, but I think they're past 60.
Okay.
And it certainly would be a lot easier to sell it that way to somebody that's already living there. So I do think that's a very viable program to look into.
All right.
It's also better for the folks already living there because they won't have to, you know, that unknown of what if someone who doesn't care as much as my last landlord cares buys this property, you know? It's just good for everybody. I agree with
Yes,
you.
yeah.
Well, on that point, one of the things the housing study indicated is like important for housing policy is to accommodate emerging markets. So I'm just curious what you all think this policy, which emerging markets this policy accommodates, because I wasn't really sure.
Well, I think we're seeing, and if you haven't seen the workshop, I would definitely recommend looking at, you know, going back and viewing it. It was on the, now I have to check my calendar here, the May 24th council meeting at 5 o'clock. It's on Oshkosh Media on the YouTube page. But we came up with some different kind of ideas we wanted to pursue right away and just wanted to get council feedback. And one of them was to, you know, encourage different types of housing. And one of those is if you, you know, allowing like more duplexes and rentals where maybe you live in half of the rental, but then you're renting out the other half and you have that income coming in, and that might be a viable way for somebody to live in a house and then at the same time provide, you know, a rental space for somebody else. So those are emerging trends that we are seeing to get a little bit more creative with different types, including accessory dwelling units, ADUs, you know, above the garage, the mother-in-law suite, the building, you know, in the
Sure.
backyard.
So it's a sort of if we build it, they will come, like, approach, or if we open it up for rent, they will
If we
come.
Yeah, if we adjusted our zoning code, those are easy things we can do. It's a low-hanging fruit, that positive changes that we can make to allow people to, you know, be able to, you know, have a little bit more flexibility of, you know, how to rent out space.
Sure. And zoning code changes seem to be like a major crucial part of housing policy moving forward. That's really consistent throughout like all the literature.
It's definitely
So,
trending right now.
yeah.
A lot of communities are looking at their zoning code of what they can change to, you know, encourage additional types of housing.
Based on my looking into the rent-to-own question, the only thing, the things that I think would be important in a policy are like oversight. There's a lot of recommendations that such a policy be run through like a nonprofit organization that liaises with the different, you know, housing and like the neighborhood associations, the different,
Yeah.
those different types of groups in the area.
Okay. That is something we are looking at. A lot of communities kind of have that nonprofit, you know, there's NeighborWorks or other groups like that that really focus on the rehab or low-income housing in those central city neighborhood
Yeah.
areas.
And that was another benefit of that oversight is can allow for things like tying the program to repairs of the units. So it increases the value as like the potential homeowner, you know,
Yep.
gets ready to own. And that also helps prevent things like milking the rent to owner past the value of the property and stuff like that.
Sure.
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree. It's important to put this into an actionable item upon which the city council can vote. So let's brainstorm that, all right?
Yeah, I don't know, what type of action are we looking for here? Are we
You
just
know,
saying,
these were
we
just-
we generally approve of like the housing studies rent-to-own idea?
Yeah, these were just the two ideas that kind of floated to the top of the conversations, really. You know, of course, we are looking at all types of housing, from executive housing all the way down to low income. So, you know, we're looking at the whole spectrum and the, you know, housing continuum in Oshkosh. But these were two ideas that, you know, the rent to own, I think, kind of really struck a chord with this group, just with, you know, how to, you know, encourage ownership, but then at the same time, you know, hopefully improve those, continue to, you know, upkeep the rental units too, you know, in a form of succession planning almost.
I guess my next question, or kind of off of what we're all saying here, like, how specific are we looking for as far as guidelines? Are you looking for like, rental advisory board all says yay? Or are you looking for, and here's what they think it should be?
That's kind of what I'm going to go, we're talking to some different boards and committees, so when we're talking to council, I can say, the rent-to-own is a program that the rental, housing advisory board is supportive of, and I can kind of go into detail that way.
Okay, because I don't pretend to know much about zoning, but I'm happy to learn. I just know there's folks way better educated at that than I am. Is everybody on board with both of these programs?
The only thing I would say is the rent-a-room, that was an idea that a former board member kind of came up with, and I don't really have a lot of details with that one, so I'm a little bit more unsure of how you'd want to proceed with that one. It was not included in the study, so if there's something you guys would like to look at, or just start with one for now, just let me know.
I mean, I think it feeds into, or the rent to rent a room idea, I think also relates to, I think TJ said, or mentioned, I read it in the minutes of the last meeting, like open up those additional, like short-term transitional housing opportunities, or potentially, or maybe not so short-term, but couch, somehow like protect the couch surfers, protect those people. This to me sort of fits maybe into more of that framework than I think what our former board member had in mind, because, well, I think it is an interesting idea and certainly adds units to the pool, as well as like preserves character of the neighborhoods and things like that potentially, and provides the opportunity for like direct assistance to homeowners. There's a lot of enforcement questions that I have, and if they would require like special leases, do these units fall under the same regulatory expectations as the big apartment complexes or the duplexes or whatever. That's where my confusion and concerns lie on this particular
Like,
point.
would it just inherently need to be month to month, for example? Because if we're, hitting couch surfers, et cetera, folks with, but that's the thing, I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it can be there for folks who, but then, like you said, we got to talk that out. We got to figure out what's the smartest proposal to make as far as, I'm just thinking technically, like, it really comes down to like, how many bathrooms are there in that unit, and like how many, like, is it really a situation where, I can't imagine many folks wanting to stay sharing a bathroom for a whole year and sign their name to that, like, I don't think that's realistic. I'm sure there's some people out there that would, but perhaps leaning more on month to month for that would be, a way to think about it. And also it's a way for the city to like get its feet wet and like see if we like this program, try it for 6 months. I think we had talked about that in previous meetings too, like just see how it goes.
Piloting
Basically,
things,
decriminalizing people who let their friends crash at their place for 6 months while they find a new job. That's
Sure.
essentially another way of saying this.
And we know that happens, and that's why we kind of talked about like the accessory dwelling units. If you
Yeah.
have space above your garage, and obviously there's building codes that it needs to meet, because we want to make sure people are safe. But it is something we are looking at the zoning code, because one of those items is, there are in certain districts, like a maximum number of unrelated people that can be in there. So we're also looking at those, that code too, to see, does it make sense to change that also? But at the same time, we have to, look at the building code, the minimum housing, to make sure that, we're putting people in a safe situation also. So it's kind of a balancing act, but we are just looking for different ways to, allow, different types of housing with knowing people are in different situations, and it's not a cookie cutter approach.
So in that discussion, are you talking about some of these larger homes, or an older person that you could make a caretaker's apartment, or those type of things? Is that in that
Mother-in-law
discussion as
suite,
well?
something similar to that, yeah.
Okay, because one of the things about renting a room would be that if you could create a separate entrance or something like that.
Yeah, and that's where
would make a
we'd
big
have to
difference.
yes,
And I don't know what that would be with city codes to actually make a separate entrance into
Be
a.
more about building code,
Yeah.
where we would have to kind of talk through those options.
Yeah, because we are in a really, really bad crisis as far as having enough
Yeah, no,
households.
and we know there's multi-generational, households out there and everything now, so, we want to see what we can do in our code to maybe accommodate, the different types of housing that, we're seeing right now.
I think we have to be careful about the difference between renting a room and a rooming house, right?
Yeah, that is something else that we do, account for and deal with, in inspections to a rooming house versus that. So that would have to be
Where it's
distinguished.
an owner occupant that is renting out a room in their house versus somebody that's renting out rooms in a 4-bedroom home. That's where I think you end up with a lot more problems than if it's an owner occupant that's just renting out a room in their home.
So, if I may attempt to summarize, is it fair to say that generally we think rent to own with, a fair and viable regulatory framework and oversight is preferable, but when it comes to the rent a room, we as a board do not think that that particular policy is viable, but we do generally support zoning or looking into changes in zoning laws that would allow for more of the,
Accessory dwelling unit.
say it for the people in the back,
Accessory dwelling unit.
accessory dwelling unit. Yes.
Well, I would say Airbnb initially started out as rent a room, actually it was like rent a couch, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there may be some of that going on already, although Airbnb kind of turned more into renting out my whole house. It started out as renting out either my couch or renting out a room in my house. So, but now to have Airbnb in Oshkosh, you have to have a state license and city.
The city does have a license, but we're mindful of just with our situation, back to EAA. So we have kind of it would have to be more of a longer term. So we're a little bit different than I call like tourist areas, like maybe Nashville, where, their program is a little bit more strict. Ours, because we see it more just with like EAA, and some of those larger events.
But so does somebody that's renting out through Airbnb, in Airbnb, they have to get a license to do
Yeah,
that,
if they
right?
have, if they are renting it out for us over a certain number of days a year, the actual number escapes me, more than I think it was like 14, because we wanted to, all the people that rent their houses during EAA, we wanted to not have to make them go through the program, because that's not the primary use, but if your use is a vacation home, then they do have to have a license and register through the city.
Okay.
Thoughts, comments, discussion? Are we voting on anything?
No, like I just said, I wanted your feedback. Those were the ideas.
Just making sure.
That I kept hearing, so no action item, but I will certainly keep this board engaged with, what's going forward. Our next steps is we're kind of looking at all the different feedback we got from council, and we'll be bringing, them back some information. But I do encourage you to, look at that workshop and watch the workshop. There was some great information in there and good dialogue that I thought we had.
Cool. Item 10, other business. One thing quick, I'd like to remind everyone that Rent Smart classes are running now through the month of November, I believe. So if anyone out there is interested, hop on to the UW Extension website and sign up. I think it's worth
Are
it.
those all online or in person now? Do you know?
I do not know.
Online?
I do not know.
Okay.
I think they're online. I'm not 100%.
They
sure.
were all online. I just didn't know if they were in
I
person
think
again.
they're still online.
We'll
Okay.
make sure that we market that on the Facebook page too,
Okay.
again.
I guess I'd also like to have perhaps a more in-depth discussion about zoning and the specific types of codes or like areas of code, I don't know, that the housing study goes over that we can,
Yeah.
kind of like we had here, just a brainstorm / like, how do we feel about these policies discussion? Because that's at least something close to actionable that we can then present to council,
Right.
which I think is neat. And I like TJ's parking idea about finding ways to protect people living in their cars.
And at least it shows the city residents that we, A, know there's a problem, we're not ignoring it, it's hard to fix it, but we're trying, and B, here's a big Band-Aid, and it's not nothing, but it's, and that's the thing, I hope it's not seen, some will see it as though it looks bad that, you know, we're acknowledging that there's people in their vehicles right now and have been for years, if we're being honest, but especially now. But I do feel like taking the higher road, like the most morally just path, is to admit we have that problem, admit we're working on it, and admit that in the meantime, here's a Band-Aid because we care about you as human beings. And government is slow. And like, I don't think anyone in the room would argue with any of that stuff.
And I think, like, if we were to say, want people to come and, like, sign up or register, leave their names somewhere, that gives us the opportunity then to, like, perform outreach or get them reference to, like, additional services and things like that, potentially.
That does happen a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, our OPD here is wonderful, and they do sometimes come across folks that are in their car, and they do try to get them services or any, help that they might need. So we are doing that, but I will check and see if we have a little bit, maybe more concrete number to see how often we deal with it, because I guess is this something that you hear about, people that are living in their cars and they get tickets? I guess it's not something I directly hear, but is that something that, you're hearing in the community?
I can tell you, as someone who lived in my car briefly, not in Oshkosh, but I didn't want anyone to know I was doing it. And I think we can all understand why people might feel that way.
And I understand that, but I guess I can maybe just look at our tickets to see if there's any information, but is it an issue here? Because I know that I've talked with, other, department heads where other facilities, like if there is somebody in a city parking lot and they're living there, we don't tell them they have to leave. Like, they can stay.
Well, I think,
I mean,
right. I think part of the point is making a statement to the community, right, that says, the city has these people, like, has these people's back, like, officially. It's really important that staff do those types of things, like you were just saying, obviously. But,
I think this is really kind of weird, because, and here's why. Because if I were to rent out a car to somebody for $1 in my yard, would that be okay with city inspection? No.
no.
And yet we're saying.
If it's on the grass, or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And no one's saying that.
We can't even rent out a car to somebody on the, we can't even leave the car parked in the grass.
No.
And now we're saying we're advocating to allow people to live in cars when all we've been talking about is housing violations. How is it possible that it's safe and sanitary to live in your car, but it's not safe and sanitary to live in some apartment?
Because when someone's living in their own car, they're not paying a landlord to live in, like, unsafe and unsanitary conditions. And it's assumed, I think, or at least, like, the hope being that the situation for those individuals is temporary.
So if the landlord doesn't charge rent to them and they're living in a safe and unsafe situation, you're okay with that?
No. Any housing agreement in the state of Wisconsin, regardless of the amount of rent, is subject to the same standards
But
as.
that's where I think, as a board, I just find it, I think it's wrong-headed to say that we're gonna be okay with people, to advocate for people living in safe and unsanitary conditions, which is what we're doing when we're saying we're advocating for them to live in their.
I think you missed, can you explain what you mean by advocate?
Well,
Because I'm not saying go live in your vehicle. That's
Well, we're
That's
saying-
asinine,
we're saying-
like-
We're proposing that there be parking lots made available for people to park their cars.
But you
Right.
think there already is, like, it's not something that, we're not enforcing. Like, we're not promoting it, but we're not giving people tickets or towing them away in the
Okay.
middle of the night. So, that's my thing. It's just, that's why I asked the question. Is that something you're hearing, in the community where it is an issue or folks have been getting tickets? Because that's certainly something, we can
Sure.
look at.
Can we have it as a discussion item for the next meeting, just so we can, like, do some research
Okay.
in the meantime,
Sure.
and then
Absolutely.
if it's a no-go, then, whatever.
Okay,
If there's something there, then there's something there, maybe.
okay. Sounds good.
Any other things you want to talk about in, August, that we're looking at?
August 10th, I believe, is the next.
updates from our partner organizations, of course, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe our new board members will be there.
Hopefully.
And, all right, anything else? Any housing study things you want to, policy-wise, you want to hammer out?
Do we get a sort of a directive from the council of what they want us to be advising them on? Because this is an advisory board, and I know, and I've said this before, I appreciate the information that we get, and we all get it here, and we learn a lot, but it does seem like we're taking up staff time. I'm not exactly sure what, what the goal of this board is.
And once again, Todd, that information is in our, like, it is stated in our mission and our action plan, like, what the board does. And that's something we all looked at and we all voted on.
I mean, yeah.
And like, if the discussion is not going the way you want it, bring us something we can talk about, right? I mean, just saying, like, this isn't appropriate for this board doesn't address those problems either. And I'd be happy to have policy discussions. Like, I want to have policy discussions. And that, I think, is what, ultimately we want to be advising council. Like, right now, we have the unique opportunity to talk to them about the housing study, right? Which is why we need to have discussions about specific policies in that encyclopedic document, because otherwise it's kind of just a bunch of that useless data. If there are other things outside of that you want to talk about, like, it is this time in the meeting where we decide what we want to talk about in the next agenda. So even if it's just a question you have, something you want to look more into, or a discussion you want to have, like, you can bring those things up.
No, my point is that the board is set up by the council to provide advice to the council. And I don't know what advice the council wants given, or if any. Is there anything that they want advice on at the moment, or if any? Otherwise, why are we all wasting people's time?
I think we're here to propose action items to council, and they are there to move forward with them if they are quality items.
So the Boards and Commissions website says the board's purpose is to advise staff on the creation of a rental housing educational materials and residential rental training programs for landlords and tenants to review and make recommendations regarding city policy and changes to the municipal code pertaining to rental housing. So that's kind of in, I won't call it our bylaws, but that's our purpose. That's what's in, our code right now. When this group was created, it was in response to the rental registry program, for a place for landlords and for tenants to kind of come together and have these discussions on, a platform, where we could hopefully, compromise and work on some projects, mainly messaging, get the word out. So that's kind of why, we're definitely talking about the rental registry program, the housing study a bit. But, we are.
And I mean, COVID and things have kind of limited our opportunities to act in the last few years, which has, like, been detrimental. Yeah, that's pretty clear. But, the future is potentially bright. And, like, again, to sort of answer your question, I think council will consider whatever we indicate is important for them to consider. Right, Lindsay?
Yes, and I was going to say, if I can speak on behalf of council.
Council member.
I mean, I think, so we've set up some goals around housing and actually putting this plan into action. So I think we as a council are open to whatever recommendations this board comes up with because of this plan. So hopefully that helps.
Anything else? All right. Please think of areas where you want the brochures dropped off at. Let's just get a big old list going, and then we can figure out how to get those things there. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I make a motion.
Don, Lindsay.
Okay.
Anyone opposed? Cool. We'll call this meeting adjourned. Thanks.